please stand for a moment of silent reflection and remain standing for O Canada? Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Members of council, you've had a chance to look at items on the agenda. Is there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, that'll be noted. Adoption of the minutes of the closed meeting and regular meeting held April 28th be adopted as presented.
I'll move the
Councilor
minute.
Mosh and Councilor Reno, all in favor? That carries. Any errors, omissions? Seeing none. Mayor's comments. I just have a couple. I'd like to pass along our condolences to all who have passed away from this virus, as well as their families. Such a terrible event not to be able to have your family by your side at this tragic time. Today is a significant day as it's International Nurses Day, and we cannot thank them enough for all they do, not just now, but throughout not just through this pandemic, but every day. As the saying goes, save a life once, you're a hero. Save a life every day, you're a nurse. Congrats and thank you to LaSalle Culture and Recreation Department for their introduction of the virtual fitness programs. What a great idea, and I'm glad they took it. Please, people, take the time to register at www.lasalle.ca/register. I think it's a great to do. It's free. And again, thanks to LaSalle Culture and Rec for putting that out. And sad to say, last Friday was the last edition of the LaSalle Post. We'll miss them, and we want to thank them for their past services over the years. So first item on the agenda, LaSalle Sports Field update during this pandemic. Mr. Mara.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, we have the self-contained breathing apparatus as item number 1.
Okay. I'm sorry. You're correct. E1, and that's from the chief? How come? Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry,
This report refers to the replacement of our self-contained breathing apparatus for the department. Deputy Chief Thiessen led the project, and I'll let him speak to it.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a couple of additional comments. Like most elements of the fire service, self-contained breathing apparatus, more commonly referred to as SCBA, SCBA2 are designed and tested to an NFPA standard. Our existing SCBAs were purchased in 2009 and meet the 2007 NFPA standard. Since then, there have been two updates to the standard governing SCBAs, one in 2012 and one in 2019. The new standards represent health and safety upgrades based on injuries and recommendations coming from inquests. If approved, the SCBA purchase presented to you today meet the 2019 NFPA standard. Although there are many new features, there are two that we are particularly excited about. First is the addition of lights that are visible from 360 degrees that signal different warnings with respect to temperature and conditions and remaining air. These variables change, or as these variables change, the lights shine different colors, providing easily visible firefighter safety warnings to not only the firefighter wearing the pack, but also those around them. Second, and very exciting, is a voice amp module. So as you can imagine, communicating via radio while wearing a full face mask while performing strenuous physical tasks presents challenges with audio quality. With the latest NFPA standard, this challenge is overcome and voice audio has been exponentially improved. Although it is not a mandated standard, it is a best practice that almost all municipalities adhere to, and that is replacing SCBAs after 2 NFPA standard upgrades. The purchase before you today follows this unwritten guideline. As mentioned, our existing equipment was purchased in 2009 with NFPA standard revisions in 2012 and 2019. We used a committee of team members and the members of our health and safety committee to participate in vendor presentations. We hosted 3 vendors. All 3 vendors provided demo packs for our use and made them available to us for a few weeks. During this time, a number of our firefighters had an opportunity to wear the demo packs during training evolutions. Considering heavily the recommendations from this committee, only 2 of the vendors were asked to submit quotes, summaries of which are in the report before you. As written in the report, the purchase was approved in the 2020 budget deliberations, and we are thankful to present to you today a report that falls within the budget. These are my comments, and the chief and I are available for any questions. Thank you.
Council members, any questions? Deputy Mayor Malash. A little bit.
Okay, I'll try to be loud. Thank you very much, Chief. My question actually isn't about the self-employed, I think it's as well in the budget, but I'm just going to approve it. My question to you is, the budget that you're getting rid of, can it be used for to another part of the company account to
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I think she was asking if I could catch it, Crystal, if I'm correct. You're asking if the old equipment could be used? Okay. Ed, I think she was asking if the old equipment could be used.
So it is possible for some smaller municipalities to use this equipment, although it is old and it's been used quite heavily. I'm not sure that there's going to be much worth in selling it. There may be an opportunity to donate it overseas or something like that, but I don't think that we could sell or it has any worth in the country of Canada.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Crystal, we'll try again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Little.
Okay. I meant as a donation, similar to what the county is doing for things up in, I want to say more than I was wondering if that's something we could do with our old, the saying it's a guideline to replace after 2 updates, not necessarily required.
You got that, Ed?
Yeah, through you, your worship, if I understand that correctly, yes. In speaking with the vendors, it really has no worth to us here, but they will put us in touch with other countries that can use it, and they have, like, there's established agencies that will help us get them to the people that need it.
Does that answer your question, Deputy Mayor? Yes. Any other questions? Seeing none, moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, seconded by Councillor Licio Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Now we go to Peter Mara and the LaSalle Sports Field update.
Good evening. So tonight's report is a follow-up request from our April 14th council meeting. It's to provide an update on the LaSalle Sports Field during the pandemic. So as of right now, there is no definite timeline on when recreational sports are going to resume. We're currently in a holding pattern at this point and performing some basic essential maintenance on the sports field. So at this stage, we are currently remaining status quo with the essential work. We have had a number of discussions with some of the user groups, and they are aware of the current situation. Certainly, once we receive the okay and the idea of when organized sports will resume, the town is going to require approximately 4 to 6 weeks to get the fields ready for play. That will be geared towards working with the user groups on what the most desperate need is on some of the fields, and we can concentrate efforts to getting some of those fields ready as soon as we get an indication on when recreational sports will resume. So with that, the report's presented to be received by council, and with that, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions? Deputy Mayor Malash, let's try that again.
I hope you can hear me. I don't know why you can't.
That's a little better.
Okay, so my question is, I know we're saying 4 to 6 weeks to meet of our current situation. Is there any work that can be done in the meantime to slowly prepare them that would be normal maintenance?
Did you get that, Peter?
I think, is there any work that we can do now in the meantime? Certainly, we are going to, some of the most time-consuming effort is to lay out and paint lines on the field. Certainly, if we go and purchase paint now, the paint does not last for a very long time when it's not being used. So we would waste that paint. We are going to do some preliminary layout. Effective next week sometime, we will be getting full complement of staff back. We will try to do some preliminary layout so it doesn't take so long when we do have to turn it over. We're getting things in place, but we're not able to get all the lines painted because it's just going to be, again, a waste of paint and a waste of money to do that effort. So certainly we'll be ready when they want to play. And again, it's putting up the nets and things of that nature. As we start to do that, we will probably start to promote people to show up to the parks and use them when they're currently at this point still closed. So we will monitor this as we go through and try to get some of the initial layout and legwork done so that when we do have to turn this over, we can do it in a timely manner. But again, if everything works out and everybody wants all the fields at once, there will be take some time to turn some fields over in a timely manner to the various user groups.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions from council members? Seeing none, council's pleasure.
Motion to receive the report.
Moved by Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Councillor Akpata. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Patty Finero, reopening of recreational programs.
Good evening. As the report states, we have begun to look ahead to when restrictions are lifted, but there are a number of considerations that we'll need to take into account before the Walmart can resume regular operations. It's anticipated that it will take us approximately 4 to 6 weeks to return to the full schedule of activities once restrictions are are lifted. In the meantime, we did announce some virtual fitness programs for the community, and plans are underway to offer some additional options in the coming weeks. And I'm available should you have any questions.
Any questions? I don't see any. Deputy Mayor Malash.
My only question revolves around the first bullet point about rate pay. Do we have anything scheduled that we want with that ice and rate for the time being? Or do we not just wait till our normal late August?
Did you get that, Patty?
I did not.
He was talking about a schedule. Was it for ice schedule, Crystal?
Yeah, so rate A, it says that we're looking for installing 2 should the ice rink be required. Do we have any requirements for that ice right now?
We do not. At this point, the rink A is out as it was scheduled to be for the summer. So depending on when restrictions are lifted, there will be a couple of weeks to put that back in.
Okay. Council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Carrick, seconded by Councillor Rudicchio Spagnolo. Before the vote, Batty, I just want to say congrats on the your virtual fitness program. I think that's a great idea, and hopefully it's free. So give them some people something to do when they're at home. So congrats on that. So on the motion, all in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just make a comment, perhaps just maybe some assistance. If members of council, if their laptop or their device is connected to a Bluetooth device, that might interfere with the microphone or speaker volume. So just you might want to take a look at that in case that we have had that situation happen on some of our other Zoom calls.
Thank you, Mr. Militia. Mr. Langlois, COVID-19 financial impact update. There he is. Hi, Dale.
Hi. Worship, members of council. So the purpose of this report is to identify costs related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and then also identify future risk to the town, and then mitigating measures that are in place right now. This report's as at the end of April 30th. So at this point in time, the financial impact to the town of LaSalle is approximately $260,000. I know it seems like an eternity, but as at April 30th, it's really been 3 weeks since the province declared the emergency. So this is going to be a monthly report going forward. We're going to keep track of these expenses, just keep council and our residents up to date. And then administration in our department head group and our emergency management group, we're constantly monitoring different options, and as this progresses, we're making adjustments to basically to look at our financial decisions to make sure the impact on the town's as low as possible. So looking at the report, as you can see, the biggest impact's not the additional costs and expenses, it's more related to lost revenue. So the largest items currently, and also the largest risks moving forward, is the related to the lowered prime interest rate. We were earning about 3% on our bank account balances. That's been drastically reduced as the prime rate has gone down. So that's a current large impact, and also it's going to be a future impact until the economy gets going again and the Bank of Canada increases their prime rate. In an effort to help our residents out, we have waived any penalty on late tax and utility bill payments right now. So we usually, in a normal year, we do receive, that is a source of revenue to us, but to help out our residents in this difficult time, especially if they aren't working or have reduced income, we're waiving until the end of June. Right now, we'll look at it again in the next month, but we're waiving penalty. So that's an impact as well. And then there's the culture and rec, the VOLMER, that I call it net revenue, revenue net of operating costs. You know, the arena, that's probably our biggest impact. The summer months, we don't earn as much revenue from the arenas, but in the winter months, which includes March and part of April, that revenue is gone. As stated in the report, it's not as easy as flipping a switch and turning off the Valmer. You know, if we drain the pool, that liner is going to dry out and crack. The seals are going to crack. It's going to cost us more to replace and repair than any savings in hydro and staffing costs to keep it running. And that's the same with the arenas. Typically, we take one pad out in the summer months, which we've done this year. If we took two out, we have to start putting ice back in both pads in August if we want to have ice ready for the next hockey season in the fall. And with the high temperatures in August, it would be nearly impossible and could potentially blow up some of the compressors if we took both ice pads out. So we do have to keep one of the ice pads in, which is normal practice. So if this pandemic lasts to the end of the year or beyond, once we hit September, that's a really large financial impact, especially if we have to keep the building up and running with the lost revenue sources. And then another factor that is the supplemental levy revenue. We have typically, I think June, we get our first our first assessment goes out for any new construction. I see that probably being delayed, but you know, as construction stopped, the longer this lasts, that's less new assessment for us. That's going to impact this year. It could impact future years. If the economy starts taking a hit, if this lasts an extremely long time and the economy doesn't rebound, just based on past experiences in 2008, 2009 during the Great Recession, it will have a significant impact on our operations and our revenue sources coming in. So that's the biggest risk into the future. Then there's also the risk of collections. At this point, we haven't had a significant amount of residents not able to pay their bills. It has increased, but right now there's no red flags. We're continually monitoring that. So that is also a risk moving forward into the future that we're continually monitoring. And then there's a bunch of other smaller, lower risk items and lower financial impact items. But as the months go on and we can get an accurate estimate on how much it's costing us, we'll report to council in future financial impact reports. And then just the last two comments I want to make is, you know, 90 to 95% of our budget is really uncontrollable services that we must provide. We have our garbage collection, disposal, fire, police, a lot of our public works. We need running water. The infrastructure is going to continue to need replacements, so we need to continually fund that and build that up. The absolute mandatory items I was looking earlier today make up probably more than 95% of our budget. So they're really, I hear comments sometimes, you know, you should be saving money. You should be lowering or issuing a refund to the residents, but that's ultimately not the case. It's actually costing us more money, this pandemic. But we are looking at ways to help our residents as much as possible moving forward, and we'll continue to report back to council. And then the last comment I want to make is, over the past number of years, we've been successful at building up our tax stabilization reserve. That balance is, right now, it's at $4.2 million. And I often get the comment or question, what is that used for? And this is a perfect example of when we would use money from the tax stabilization reserve. It's used to fund extraordinary items that are not budgeted for. And this is obviously not budgeted for, and it's extraordinary, and it's substantial. So we do have more than enough in that account to cover us for this year, for sure, you know. And we also have the risk of flooding that could potentially cost us some money if the water levels continue to rise, but we're monitoring that situation as well. So on that note, I'm happy to answer any questions, and moving forward, there'll be a monthly update for council.
Counselor Carrick. You're still muted, Mark. No.
How about that?
Yeah,
Okay, thanks. Well, anyways, you and your staff, this is a very good financial update, even though it's a sobering one, understanding what we're dealing with here. And I'm glad to see that this will be done every month because it gives us a better picture of what we're dealing with. And I was here in 2008, 2009, when we went through that. But this, I think, if things keep going the way they're going, it might be even a little tougher. So as we get a little closer, we'll be able to understand it. And I understand $280,000 to date. So realistically, it's only been about a month since we've been actually dealing, or maybe a month and a half that we've had that kind of a loss. So that's not quite 1%. That's like just over 0.5% of the budget. So we know going forward, we are going to be in the hole coming toward budget time, but it's good for us to get these updates so that we know what we're dealing with, and thank goodness for that reserve. And I certainly appreciate that. So I look forward to these monthly updates, and it's really broken down well. So it's easy to understand, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Carrick. Any other questions from members of council? Counselor Reno and then Counselor Akpata.
Thank you, Your Worship. Dale, I just wanted to say thank you as well. Much the exact same things as Councillor Carrick said. You know, seeing all the little things in the report really help us understand where things are going. Your explanation tonight about when we, you know, make money on ice and don't make money on ice also really puts things into perspective as things drag on. If there's no better word to say, drag on. But thank you for the report, and I too look forward to the next one in a month.
Counselor Akpata.
Through your worship, either Dale or Joe, provincial or federal mitigation as far as funding goes to offset our losses, do we see that coming down the pipe? Has there been any discussion or anything come to the municipality about a type of relief or anything whatsoever?
At this point in time, we are not aware of anything coming down the pipe. I know for it's stated in the report, the education tax, they're deferring that by a quarter. So far, that's their one financial relief measure. We are keeping track of expenses. If any information does come out, we'll share it with council, and we're going to keep track of all of our additional expenses to be prepared to support any amount that we qualify for. But at this point, there's nothing in it. Nothing's been announced federally or provincially for municipalities.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Just perhaps further to the comments from Mr. Langlois, we don't, again, we are tracking our costs in the event that there are some funding programs that do open up. Realistically, though, I think our best case or our best chance or our best scenario would be to be involved with a stimulus project that happens post-COVID as the senior levels of government try to stimulate the economy. That seemed to have been what happened as we came out of the 2008 and 9 recession. At that point, the government was very aggressive in doling out funds at that point, matching funds obviously, but doling to having a number of programs back in the 2009-2010 period to help stimulate the economy, both from a job growth perspective and just a job and an economic growth perspective. So we could see some of that. I would also, caution members of council. I know there's been some media reports with respect to what perhaps municipalities and other agencies might expect. Realizing, both the federal and provincial governments are expending a significant amount of dollars throughout this pandemic on a number of things that they were unexpected. And so, the deficits are growing on their sides, again, understandably so. So it would be probably a little unrealistic to expect that as their deficits grow, they're going to grow them even more in order to pass money down to municipalities. That's again, we hope so, but again, realistically, I'm not so sure that if I was in their shoes, particularly with municipalities who have the ability to raise revenues, I'm not so sure that we can expect to have that. So I think, again, from a sobering side, again, we're not expecting anything from the federal and provincial governments, but perhaps one of the things that we are expecting coming out of this is potentially some sort of stimulus program to help with capital works and things of that nature, again, for job creation and then inserting dollars into the economy.
Thank you, Joe. That'd be a nice welcome event if it happens. Council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Dicho Spagnolo, seconded by Councillor Reno. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Windsor Essex Solid Waste Authority recycling information. I don't think anyone's to speak on it unless Joe wants to, but I sit on that board and they are putting the big campaign out. So everybody who does social media, if you want to push it, no plastic. They're trying to make it as simple as they can. We were supposed to go to the producers take over the cost and recycling. We're getting feedback unofficially that it might not happen for another year or two. So it'll be borne by us, possibly a partnership where the municipalities still collect it and the producers will pay for it, but that's too far off. But any questions on no bags? Council's pleasure. Moved by Councilor Desjardins, seconded by Councilor Reno. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Summary of reports to council. Councilor Militia. Sorry, Joe.
Again, as we look at the scheduled reports for council, we've tried to take a look at the reports that are available or on record to be made, to be presented to council. And we've divided them into two categories, those that we believe are more administrative in nature, and we've assigned more of a timeline in terms of when we expect to have those to council. And then those that are more public, that require more public input or public consultation. And those will have to be more contingent on some of the changes on the social gathering and physical distancing requirements that we're currently under. So again, the reports are there before you. We've tried to insert some realistic timelines in terms of getting information back to council with respect to the outstanding reports at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Militia. I noticed that. That's a good idea. Deputy Mayor Malash.
Okay, how about now? Okay. My question goes to pedestrian safety. Is there a way that this report could also include something for Leader Small Road intersection that has become very popular on social media lately with safety and not maybe the signage that we need in that intersection so that drivers stop pedestrians? So I know that's the initiative and that's to if we could maybe speak to Liam when we get that report presented to us.
Did you catch that, Joe?
Well, if I understand it correctly, the question was regarding the Malden Road EA and the activity and status report with respect to that in particular. If I'm understanding, I only heard every third word, but I think the intersection at Reham in particular were some of the concerns that were being brought forward. Do I have the question correct?
Sort of. Just if we could, when we present this report, maybe present something at the same time regarding Reham Road and the safety of that intersection, and things we can do in the meantime while we wait for the county and the DOT to move forward that intersection. Maybe signage or something to that where I don't know if you've driven past that intersection recently, but the signage is very small and vehicles don't stop for pedestrians there. So maybe something we can do in the meantime to keep our residents safe.
So So if I've got the question correct, it's again, the status of the Malden Road EA, as well as anything else that we could do with particular emphasis on signage or any other measures that we might be able to take with respect to some of the safety issues that are being brought forward on Malden. I think that's the question. So I think I see Mr. Mara on the video call, and he'll probably answer.
Certainly, with respect to the report, we can give you an indication with respect to the status of the current EA and what is expected in terms of ultimate timelines for Ream Road. With respect to, I think the concern was relative to the current crosswalk that is there. If council wishes, we could do a separate report on that to deal with that on an interim basis. It currently meets all the requirements set out in the relative Ontario traffic manuals, but certainly we can certainly put something together in a timely manner within the next couple meetings to kind of get something in front of council relative to trying to deal with that concern, if that is something that council wishes, and we can do a separate report relative to the crosswalk at that location if council wishes.
Mr. Mayor, I see a lot of nodding heads, so I think that we will prepare the two reports, one again with respect to the EA and the status of that, but then the second report dealing more specifically with some of the safety concerns and crosswalk issues at Ream.
I might add, it's not only at that intersection for the crosswalk. If you go down other areas, I think of one at Matchett and Gulfview. I see several people standing at the intersection and no one stops. So I think there's a big education component we have to do. And I don't know if we can do something coordinated with the police as well, because people just are not accustomed to them. We're putting in the crosswalks and the signage and they just drive right by. So we'll see what we can do on that front as well. Okay. On the reports to council, motion received. Deputy Mayor Malash and Councillor Desjardins, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. So we have bylaw 8430 and then we added 8431. On both bylaws, all three readings. Councillor Reno and Councillor Licio Spagnolo, all in favor. That carries unanimously. Thank you. Any council questions? Councillor Reno, then Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple things. First of all, a comment for Joe and Peter. As many know, I spend a lot of time on social media, listening and talking, and there's a lot of people that are very happy with the work that's been done down at the waterfront to raise the docks. I want to thank Peter for all the work that went into getting that done and getting it done in a very timely and cost-effective manner. And Joe, I would like to thank you for your communication today, this morning, concerning what's keeping people from the water right now, and that's been communicated out, and I think people are understanding. So thank you for your part in that as well. I think this question is going to go to Peter, and it may seem a little off the wall, but there was one other thing that the community seems fairly happy right now with all the things that we're going through, but there's one burning question that's out there. Peter, there down in Old LaSalle, there is a beeping that goes every 20 to 30 seconds. And although I don't hear it from my house, it drives people crazy. There are thoughts that it may be coming from BASF. There's thoughts that it might be coming from our waterfront. Do you have any information that you might be able to share, or do you know anything about this beeping?
Thank you, Council. I have heard some of those concerns. I have tried to go out. I've heard beeping, I've heard bells, I've heard various iterations of what people are hearing. I have sat out in the area for a period of time, tried to hear and listen to what it was. I haven't been able to distinguish it myself at the times that I have been out there. All of our indications right now have been pointing the people to the Ministry of the Environment. They deal with some of those nuisance calls relative to the things like the hum and things of that nature. At this point, we haven't had an ability to figure out at this point if where it is coming from. We know for sure that it's not coming from a town of LaSalle run facility and or building and or property. So those are some of the tough things. I'm not aware of anything that has changed over the years in that area as well. So it's tough to identify where that is actually coming from. This might be something that maybe the Ministry of the Environment, the local office might be able to help out with. And if they hear the people's concerns and they may check into that and do a bit of investigating. But at this point, we haven't been able to identify what that source was.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering, I think that's a great thing for the people to reach directly. So there's a one-to-one contact with the Ministry of Environment. I'm wondering from our side, we seem to have a pretty good relationship with Fighting Island. And it seems there's a lot of thoughts that it's coming from there. Might administration be able to just make a courtesy call over there, see if there's been any changes or if they may be aware that may help in this investigation?
I'll take care of that one, Joe. I do hear it. I hear it in the morning, and I open my windows for fresh air and I hear it. And you're right, Jeff, it's about every 20 seconds or so. And I believe it's coming from the water area. So whether it's Fighting Island or across to Grosse Pointe, it's definitely coming from that way. But I'll reach out to Fighting Island tomorrow and I'll report back to administration.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Councillor Akpata, was it? Had your hand up or Desjardins?
No, Desjardins.
Desjardins, I'm sorry. Sue, you muted yourself. There you go.
Along with Jeff, thank you, Peter and Joe, for the explanations about the dock, because that is a pretty hot topic right now. But my question has something to do, Joe, with something that you said, talking about money that may come as assistance. Do you see anything happening perhaps with withdrawal of grant applications? You know how we have a grant in for the new Riverfront Coast. Do you think that with everything else that's being handed out, that grants like that might be pulled back?
Again, it's an interesting question. At this point, generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, in situations where there's been a slowdown in the economy, most times senior levels of government will try to encourage the economy by putting more money into it and by expanding grant applications as opposed to reducing them. So that is, again, normally, again, if we go back over our history over the last 25 or 30 years, that seems to be a bit of the trend. You know, recession, depression, and then some sort of economic driver coming forward with respect to how that it will go or how to stimulate the economy. So I would suspect that, you know, this could follow that same pattern. On the other side, I would also say that there is, you know, this is a bit of a different animal we're wrestling with, and the pandemic is different. And so again, and for the most part, I think some of our past history was a bit of, you know, when we talk about the slowdown that happened, and, you know, it started somewhere around 2008, kind of went through 2008 and kind of twinkled into 2009. There was a more, if you will, defined start and stop time. There was this willingness afterwards that after this downturn in the economy, there was this willingness that, you know, see that the economy would rebound, although in that particular case, it was a bit of a slower rebound than we would traditionally have seen. So those are, again, what you would normally see come forward. It's difficult to estimate at this point what the situation or what the senior levels of government will do after this pandemic, because it's not a traditional economic slowdown as we would with that we've had over the last 20 years or so. So I would suspect that, you know, again, they will, if they're trying to increase economic activity, they will try to encourage more of that and probably stabilize the grant situation. I don't see, at this point, a reduction in the grant situation. That being said, again, the provincial and federal governments are expending dollars quite rapidly these days. And so they may be looking at ways to sort of tame that, but typically they don't. But again, this is not a typical situation. So it'd be pretty difficult to forecast what if anything they might do.
Good question and good answer, Joe. Councillor Carrick.
Thank you. Just going back to the Ream Malden Road intersection. My mom's business obviously is just down the road, and I grew up down that area, and practically every day they hear something about a complaint about that corner. And I'm not sure if I heard Peter correctly or not, but the assessment and the EA and everything, where's the county at on that getting back to us? Because I know we were looking at some nice fixes down there potentially, and I'm not sure where that process is. If Peter could just maybe look into it, or maybe he has the update.
Thank you, Council. That is actually subject of the report that we're putting together right now. It's currently in draft. It's being circulated internally here between planning and engineering and Joe's office, so that we can kind of bring that forward and kind of give council a fulsome update on where we stand with the EA and the various jurisdictional duties with respect to Malden Road. So that's forming all part of that formal report that will be before council. So with that, if we can hold off that, I guess that question will be answered as part of the formal report when it's brought forward to council, and we expect to bring that to council in June.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that. And I agree with the mayor. Even Matchett and Gulfview, I was there the other day, and people aren't stopping. They're just zipping through. And one girl was trying to cross with her dog, and she couldn't. So anyways, we do have some issues we have to look at. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, statements by council members. Councillor Carrick.
Yes, I will just apologize for actually joining the meeting late. Technical glitch, and I'm still working on this stuff.
You're excused. Reports from committees. Notices of motion. Confirmatory bylaw, first reading. Deputy Mayor Milosh, Councillor Reno, all in favor? That carries. Second reading, Councillor Akpata and Councillor Dicho Spagnolo, all in favor? That carries. Third and final reading, Councillor Desjardins and Councillor Carrick, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. You have your schedule of meetings coming up. Meeting adjourned. Have a good night, everyone. Stay safe.